Welcome back to the Unwind podcast. I'm your host, Lucas. I run a couple of agencies, one being a creative agency and another being a TikTok first agency. I also recently started an e-com brand, so very much still on my journey to finding success as an entrepreneur. Now, this podcast is all about meeting with like-minded entrepreneurs and professionals to go deep, have a little bit of fun as well over a drink or two out of office hours. Most business podcasts struggle to do that and are a bit formal and professional and interview like, and we definitely want to break that and go deeper, have a bit of fun, as well as offer tons of value. So you can find us on Spotify or YouTube at Unwind Podcast. Now let's get into the pod. Cool. Welcome back to another episode of Unwind. Very exciting one today. It's also a very hot day today. I'm joined by Will and Glinder. So Will, thank you so much. He's founder of The Root Co., which is a ginger beer based company. Really excited to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's cool to be here, and you're right. It is a hot day.
It is a hot day.
Hot cycle over.
Yeah, that's it. You came from North London, didn't you? Cycled all the way over.
I mean, it's not all the way. It took me all of 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's a long time for me.
Yeah, and to be fair, in the heat, it felt longer.
Yeah, fair, cool. So, in tradition of the podcast, the guest usually picks the drink of choice. Obviously, our first, Beverage. Company founder, it made sense. It would be rude not to incorporate Will's drink here. So, Will, talk to us. What are we drinking today?
So, I actually thought it was a bit naff to bring my own drinks. I quite wanted to bring some experimental ones that I haven't tried yet, but I brought some of my own ginger beer, and we've also got some Captain Morgan dark spiced rum to try with it. Creating a nice dark and stormy is the idea for a Thursday night.
Very nice. So ratios, what are we saying for this then?
I reckon liberal on the rum.
Yeah.
Let's get a nice free-flowing conversation. Do you want me to do it?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin the drink for you.
Yeah.
Cool.
Ice already in.
Nice. And I guess once we're now obviously he's going to be pouring the Root Co. ginger beer in next, and then I think that's a nice segue for introducing who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
Nice.
This doesn't require a lot of focus.
It's important.
Just want to make sure that we've got the drinks going before we...
Yeah, that's it.
There we are.
Is it carbonated or?
Yeah, very lightly carbonated.
Okay.
I think the idea was to always have it kind of less carbonated than your typical soft drink.
Yeah, nice.
Ginger's actually good for your digestion. That's how I was originally switched onto it. Cheers.
Cheers.
I hope those
Salute.
Ratios are okay.
I'm sure they'll be fine.
I'm used to dealing with transparent glasses, so.
Whew, that's good.
Oh yeah, the rum's strong in there.
The rum's strong. Yeah, it's good though. It's
Yeah.
nice. Cool. So yeah, let's just do the quick intro of who you are, and then we'll kind of go back to the start of your story and work our way chronologically through.
Sure, that sounds good. So I'm Will. I'm the founder of The Root Co. The business is just over a year old, and I basically make home recipe ginger beer, and it's supposed to be sort of halfway between a ginger beer and a ginger shot. So taking some of that nice cold pressed ginger flavour and functional feeling at the back of your throat and putting it in a longer form drink. And as I said, it's not supposed to be so much a soft drink as a health drink. So really focusing on the functional benefits of cold pressed ginger, which I think tie in quite nicely with that sort of fieriness you get with the aftertaste. I think we're going to get a particularly fiery aftertaste because of the rum
Yeah, I was
too.
gonna say.
It's like, oh, is that ginger or is it
ginger or
just
the
rum?
Yeah. Nice. Cool. So, I guess let's go back to the start then. Obviously, the way we know each other, our mutual connection is my girlfriend, who you went to university with, lived with.
That's right, yeah. Helena,
yeah, I was good friends with. I still good friends with.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I know you from uni days, but let's go back earlier than that. What was your childhood like growing up? Were you entrepreneurial? What did that all look like?
I wouldn't say that I was particularly entrepreneurial, boringly, aside from with Lego, which I loved. And even then I was determined to sort of build things quite to spec. I remember it was a really simple and happy time when I was just getting Lego gifts for Christmas.
Yeah, those are the days.
They brought out, there was like a Viking series, then there was an underwater series. I loved it all.
The Lego Star Wars were my shit.
Yeah, I had some Lego Star Wars too.
Yeah.
It's like a combination of your great loves as a small child. And yeah, I don't remember thinking, oh, I've got a passion for starting a business. I wasn't a massive Dragon's Den fiend either. I did watch a bit of Dragon's Den. And sometimes I remember actually asking my dad, what? Maybe one day I'll be an entrepreneur, without really knowing what it meant. But I do remember feeling kind of excited about the notion, but that it was sort of way off the beaten path.
Right.
And to be honest, as I grew up, I didn't feel like that attitude changed much. It's a little bit atypical, I think, to be in your mid-20s and starting a business, particularly in kind of my group of friends. I'm the first one that's done it or had a crack at it. Aside from yourself, obviously, although we're not in the same sort of. I'm mainly talking about my friends from school. But yeah, so I wouldn't say I was necessarily imbued with an amazing entrepreneurial spirit from a young age, but I think I've always been quite a hard worker, quite determined, and I guess as I've grown up, and particularly in these last few years, I've realised that it might be fun to direct a little bit of that energy to something a little more creative, something that would challenge me a bit. Yeah,
interesting. So where do you think that hard-working nature came from then? Because I mean, for me, my dad, I mean, we didn't get on very well when I was a lot young. We get on so well now, like, you know, I see him as one of my best mates. But when I was younger, you know, how hard he would make me revise, I fucking hated him. If I wanted to sit and play Xbox, he wouldn't like that. And, you know, obviously I thank him for it now, but looking back, that's probably what I'd associate with where I got it from. Is there anything from your childhood that, you know, you think that it was instilled in you that helped that?
Well, on the topic of Xbox, some of my happiest years were spent playing
Most
Halo.
Teenage boys.
Yeah, but I remember I was like 13, 14, I just got to secondary school, and some of my friends, or like the cool guys in my year, I went to an all-boys school, the cool guys in my year were going out and meeting girls and going to parties on the weekend, and I honestly couldn't have been more happy to sit in my basement on both Friday and Saturday night playing Halo Online, just there with like a sniper rifle and invisibility. It was very, very... a very happy time, to be honest, a very simple happy time.
I can see the passion coming back.
Yeah, the passion, there it is. But to return to your original question about the hard-working mentality, I mean, both of my parents are very hard-working people, and in totally different ways. They have very different skills, but they are both vastly intelligent and caring people. And I'm lucky to have grown up really kind of loving my family the whole way through. I'm also the youngest of three brothers, so my two older brothers are Tom and Simon, and we all had very different approaches to learning when we were younger. I think Simon and Tom found kind of traditional schoolwork, exams, homework, that rhythm more challenging than I did. I don't think they'll mind me saying that, because they're now off doing amazing, wonderful things. They both got married last year. They're both very successful in their jobs, which is very proud, something I'm very proud of, and always proud to talk about.
They more. What's their line of work?
Well, my brother Tom, so he's the middle one. He's 3 years older than me. He's an air traffic controller up at Manchester Airport, which again is a little atypical. And he used to be this really skinny kid with glasses. Used to be quite good at cross country, and then he went to university and discovered CrossFit, and he's now absolutely stacked and controls airplanes for a living. So he's grown up in quite an amusing way. And my eldest brother Simon, he works at the moment in third-party logistics. So he helps organise more efficient deliveries through locker systems, basically. So the idea being that if you can compile deliveries all in one place, or multiple deliveries for an area in one place, then that you can avoid that last mile delivery, which
Right.
is bad for the environment and bad from a cost perspective. You can just kind of centralize lots of deliveries in one place, which will be your lockers. So that's what he does now. And his background is quite similar to mine in the sense that he was a management consultant for a little bit too. But yeah, so I guess in contrast to them, when it came to homework, I was always quite nerdy about it, to be honest. I would do homework always on the night it was set. I think, reflecting on it, which I've done a bit recently, I get stressed by having something hanging over me. And that can literally be anything. But usually it's in the context of work. So I was feeling a little bit down recently, and I kind of realized that it's because there was this big bit of thinking or work that I needed to do. And when I say big bit, it only actually took a day in practice, but in your head it feels like longer. And it had just been bothering me for a while, I think, and getting me down. I don't know whether that's kind of linked to my determination to always do, as I said, homework on the night
That's interesting.
homework on the night it's set. But I've always been quite sort of rigid and organised, and I'm most comfortable when I feel like I've got a completely clear to-do list, then go and attack the next challenge. But I'm also quite sort of ruthlessly organised with my time as well.
Right.
So I think actually one of probably my best strength is a good concept of time, how long things will take. And then it allows you to plan really efficiently and effectively, which means that you can sort of, I don't know, I don't want to use the word optimize, but you can definitely get quite a lot done, and you can put stuff, you can organize your calendar and your schedule in such a way that you can kind of make it at its most productive, kill two birds with one stone. I love it when I manage to find a way to combine activities.
Yeah.
That's really satisfying.
Well, I think like as you grow a business, and you know you're finding this now, I've definitely found it where there becomes a point where you can only work hard for so long, and then you've got to start working smarter to scale a business or what you're doing. So yeah, it's really important to start looking at ways that you can optimize your time. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I think and the elements of, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but the elements of the business I enjoy most are the ones where I feel like I'm combining several different business needs in one activity.
Yeah.
That's always really satisfying. And I guess it is to some degree working smarter, although I'm not someone that's, I need to be, but I wouldn't say that I'm hugely strategic. I'm more a doer than I am a thinker a lot of the time. So
Right.
I will just do something and then be like, oh, I could tack this on here and tack that on there. And then suddenly you have something which looks really well thought out and amazing. But in fact, you're just kind of learning by doing.
Yeah, interesting. So just one thing I wanted to ask, because you just mentioned, you've got an incredibly successful family, parents really successful. And it's a question that it fascinates me. And it's something I actually spoke about with Alan Stewart, who's the ex-CFO of Tesco. He was on the pod, episode 4. Spoken about him quite a lot on this since, because he's a fascinating man. But he came from a fairly successful background, and then to go on and be as successful as he is, you sometimes see it works out in the reverse when you grow up, when your family are successful, because you almost become entitled and as a result lazy. So, what are your thoughts on that topic? Because you've obviously been the opposite. You've completely gone out independently, worked hard, and done the opposite of that. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I'd like to return to that final point, because I think there are lots of amazing things about my life and the circumstances in which I've grown up, which have been really big enablers of me starting a business in the first place. Because ultimately I can do maths. I can figure out how long my savings will last me. I can figure out what I kind of need in terms of, particularly, I guess, financial support in order to start a business. And I'm very lucky that I kind of have the backing of my family and, as I say, the personal circumstance in which I've grown up. So I think that let's set that to one side for a moment while I answer your first question. I personally think that if you are brought up in the right way, and my parents, I'm very, very lucky that they have made a lot of effort to I wouldn't say I've had a normal lifestyle. I've been incredibly fortunate in all sorts of ways, but they've made sure that we haven't grown up spoilt, which I think is
so important.
I think that is the key. We've learned to appreciate amazing things in the way that they should be appreciated, or at least on some relative scale of how they should be appreciated. And I think instances where we have been kind of bratty or acted in a spoilt way or acted in a kind of arrogant or unpleasant way, I think they have been stamped down on fairly firmly. My parents have always been incredibly encouraging of me and my brothers, but when it comes to stuff like humility and modesty, that is kind of where I think they would place most of their emphasis in terms of our growing up. Because I think being humble and showing appreciation for what you have. And I actually remember when I was younger, I used to be quite an arrogant, particularly when I was 10, 11, 12. I used to think I was the stuff. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on this podcast.
Please swear away.
Right. I used to think I was the shit. And my brothers will tell you as much. And I used to think I was so much older than I was. I would use turns of phrase that were much more suited to older people. Maybe it's because I had older brothers too. But I think in the environment in which we've grown up, the family that my parents have created, you don't get away with that kind of thing. And you're not ridiculed, but you just figure out pretty quickly that if you are kind of boastful or arrogant or rude to people and don't treat people with respect, then you'll, I don't know, it will come round. It will come back in some way. My favorite example, actually, which is not from my parents, is my late grandpa, who always used to say good morning or good afternoon or hello to a bus driver when he got on a bus, which
nice.
No one ever does. And I think, I actually haven't been on a bus in ages. I mainly travel by bicycle, but every time I get on the bus, I will greet the bus driver and think of my grandpa, and just that respect for your fellow human, regardless of who they are, saying please, thank you, manners.
It's interesting. I was actually listening to an interview, weirdly, with Post Malone of all people, and he was asked that, like, how are you so humble? Like, the success you've had, how are you still such a humble guy? And he was just like, I just don't understand how you could just not be nice to people. You know, you could do something that just, you know, the way you greet someone or the way you talk to someone to make them happy for a moment. Like, why would you not? And it's like, everyone has bad days, right? But, you know, I completely agree. Like, it's such a small thing that doesn't necessarily take any effort.
Yeah. And I think when I'm actually feeling down, one of the things I do to help myself is a kind of random acts of kindness for other people. I think being nice to people, showing your fellow person, your fellow man, your fellow woman respect, and being kind of generous with your time and generous with your words goes a long way to kind of making this is going to sound religious even though I'm not, but it makes your soul feel a lot more full. It makes your heart feel full. It just brings you happiness. It will make you smile, which I think is
I agree.
I think is really, really important. And I also think on the humble point, if you are a relatively grounded person, you can observe instances where you've got lucky. And I think in anyone's success story, there's a lot of luck. You have to catch a break. And usually there are other people involved, other humans there kind of making that happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are instances where that's not the case, where people have just been so individually motivated and haven't needed anyone else, and they've just risen to the top in whatever field they're in. But I think it's much more common that if you are successful, as I said, in whatever field, you've had elements of luck or support or friendship that has helped you get there. And if you are relatively grounded and can identify that other people have been involved in your success, that it's not just, wow, I'm awesome, I am the shit, then I think it becomes really easy to step away and be humble and be grateful as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So moving on then. So you next step, I think you spoke a lot about before university. You went to university.
Yeah.
Again, then, you know, because I know at first you were very much going down the corporate route, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right.
So what like, firstly talk about your experiences at uni, and then let's move on to that your job you got outside of uni and switching up to start the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to university to study economics and management, and the reason I did that is because I really like my economics teachers, and I was also quite good at it. And I thought economics is business, is cool. I want to be in a kind of well-paid job. I didn't have a clue. I wasn't appraising my own skills in any kind of true sense. I was just like, I'm good at this subject. I don't really have a clue what I want to do. Let's give it a pop. And I remember I was at the school I was at, which is St Paul's in West London. There's quite a big thing, a bit of a show and dance made about trying to get into Oxford or Cambridge. And I applied for Oxford for economics and management. And I kind of did 3 days of interview there. I got pulled, which I think might mean that I was close. I'm not really sure. But anyway, I got rejected. And I think that was the start of actually a really important, I don't know, it was the start of pretty much everything, because I hadn't had up until that point any jarring experience of failure.
Yeah.
And I think to have that failure then, which, might seem like a bit of a, I don't know, a bratty failure in itself, to be like, oh, I didn't get into Oxford. Oh, such a shame. Like, God, how terrible. But to have that was important. And I am also to this day.
Did you, before that point then, sorry to interrupt, but
No,
did you think you would, like you said, was that the point where you needed a bit of humble pie? Like, did you feel in the stage you were in there that you were not invincible, but you were the shit?
No, I'd actually think I'd lost some of that, to be fair. But what I absolutely did not have a good grasp on, or grasp of, is kind of what I wanted to do with my life, what going to Oxford really meant, what that would do for my university experience, what that would do for my job prospects. I didn't really have any idea about the cascade of how you go from school to university to finding a job, and then you slowly figure out what you want to do. I just thought, go to university, go to the best university, try and get the best job, do everything at like its optimal level. And that was just the strategy I had in mind. And what I was going to say is, to this day, I'm actually really proud of the way that I kind of handled that first failure. Because I remember my mum actually tells this story. She came into my room. This is when I still had hair, ironically. I now shave my head, even though I wear caps a lot. But I'd borrowed her hairdryer, and I was in my room sort of thinking about how I'd just been parred by Oxford University. And and she was like, can I have my hairdryer back? And I was like, Mum, my whole future's just been taken away, and now you're trying to take away my hairdryer too. But like, that was obviously said in humour rather than genuine spirit. So I think that was actually very important, that rejection from Oxford, because then I went to Bristol, which, by the way, is an absolutely fantastic university.
And I had a great city.
Great city. I had a brilliant time there. To be totally honest, I spent most of it either drunk or hungover.
Who doesn't really?
Sometimes both. And I did virtually no work in my first year. My course was demanding in some respects, but I found it really easy to do well, because versus school, where you have to compact a whole year of content into a revision period. At university, I had semesters, so you had half a year's work and then a bulk of exams, and then the same thing on repeat. And I found that by just attending the tutorials and the occasional lecture and keeping up with the content, and then really smashing the revision before your semesterly exams, you could do very well.
Strategy.
Well, I don't know. I'm definitely don't look back on that with pride, because I haven't retained that much of my economics degree. I've retained like a bit of it. But university for me was much more about meeting fun people and having a brilliant time.
You know what? I actually completely agree, because, especially in the entrepreneurial space, that everyone's very bullish on, the anti-uni argument, and I agree with a lot of it. But for me, I never went to the irony is, actually, my degree helped me a lot, in the sense of I went to film school. So a lot of what we do now as a company is in production. So kind of actually did help quite a lot. But I do think on that you go to university to for me anyway, to have a great time and meet people and have experiences. because, you know, that's almost the last time, you know, if you look back at that time, it's actually fucking crazy. Like, we really, in the grand scheme of things, you really had very minimal responsibilities.
Yeah, you would. It was a brilliant age, actually, because the responsibilities. I don't think you become aware of them until they hit, which is frustrating. Because ideally, when you're young, when you're a adolescent teen, you're kind of like, oh, I've got no responsibilities, I can go out and have a wild time. But you don't think like that, because your responsibilities are, shit, I've got to do the exams, I've got to do really well at school. And you don't actually observe those responsibilities in the context of the ones that come later, which are obviously a lot larger and a lot more serious. Even though I remember people telling me really clearly, oh, these are your GCSEs. I promise you, in like 5 years, no one will give a single
hilarious.
shit. Yeah.
Because when I'm looking at CVs now,
yeah,
I genuinely don't even look at university results. Like,
which is the right way to do it, I think.
Uni, A-level, I've never looked at a result, and I've looked at hundreds of CVs, and it's just not important to me.
Yeah. No,
I even think, just on that note, like, experience is important. Don't get me wrong, but I'm more hiring for personality type, and if someone has the right, in terms of mentality, because you can't train that stuff. You can train how to do a job, you can train how to do a service, but you can't train someone to be, naturally a hard worker.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I've thought quite a bit about recently, because I haven't hired anyone yet, but I'm hopefully going to near the end of this year. And I think the most important characteristics for me are just an organized mind, someone that replies reliably and replies fast, and someone that is a hard worker. And you're 100% right that you can't teach those things, where there's a lot of stuff you can teach. And you can also find lots of tools in the modern world to help you do, if you're not brilliant at maths, you can find a way to figure out Excel, which will do the maths for you. Like, there are lots of hard skills that you don't need, but there's stuff about drive and tenacity and really trying to get to the kind of nub of a problem, or pursuing it to the nth degree until you've got an answer. I think that's kind of stuff you can't necessarily
like
teach.
Taking initiative. Like, there's all these things that are, and there's been a few people that's been at our company that I've really that in the past that, again, just hadn't passed the probation period, because it's as they were decent at what they did, but then there were those kind of mental barriers, in a sense, that as much as we like genuinely tried to work with them on, it's really hard to instill that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
I feel like I completely failed to answer your original question, and we've jumped through a couple of tangents. But basically, I think the point I wanted to make was, I went to university to study economics because I thought I'm going to land a corporate job at the end of this. Didn't know what job it was going to be. I was like, oh, my dad's job sounded quite cool. He worked for a venture capital firm in his in the early part of his career. I was like, oh, maybe that would be a great place for me to end up investing in young businesses. That sounds quite that sounds quite cool. Or I watched Dragon's Den a couple of times when I was younger. Didn't really have any entrepreneurial spirit myself, but might be cool to engage with a bit of that. So yeah, that's basically what I did. And I was also when you're doing economics, you're kind of swept along with everyone applying for internships, because that's just what happens on an economics course. You have people asking each other, oh, what internships are you going to apply to? What's kind of going on? And even if you had no intention of spending your spring or your summer doing an internship, you would be asked anyway, and it would prompt in your mind, oh God, maybe I should be doing this. Maybe I should be building my CV. You're just kind of pulled along with the crowd. It's that kind of course. It attracts lots of people that are very driven and want to be an investment banker.
Interesting, yeah.
So that did kind of get me thinking quite early on. And my first year summer, I went to Copenhagen Business School for summer school. And then in my second year summer, I did an internship with what was then Thomson Reuters here in London. I was actually working in their kind of financial and risk division rather than for the news agency. And then I worked for a private equity firm in Munich for a month as well, which were two really good experiences. And particularly that latter one, I just worked with ex-investment bankers and ex-consultants, and I found the ex-consultants very impressive. So that gave me a direction to apply. I was like, oh, I want to be like these guys, basically.
Yeah.
It was as simple as that. And I knew that management consultancy was a good career. My dad had been a management consultant at one point. My brother was too. So I was like, oh, let me give this a pop. So I applied to loads of management consultancies, got rejected by pretty much all of them. And then the one that kind of took me to interview, I managed to do enough at interview. I remember actually there was a really arrogant moment in there. Oh God, just reliving it. So it was I think it was my final interview of the day, and I had a couple of coffees, and I don't drink any coffee, so I was a bit like wired, and I was asked to do a bit of maths. It was a kind of profitability case study. You have these case studies in consultancy. It's a certain style of interview, and I was kind of given lots of information, and I had to sort of make it into an income statement and then figure out what the profitability per unit was. And I remember at one point the interviewer, a guy called Nick, slid across a calculator and was like, you might need this. And then I took the calculator and slid it back. And I was like, it's okay, I'm going to do it in my head. Like an absolute.
Well, clearly paid off.
Well, I think they gave me a job in the end. Yeah,
They probably like that.
Maybe they did. I think
Something like that makes you stand out.
Yeah, I think maybe that was what was on my mind when I did it. I also liked doing mental maths. I like doing crossword and those puzzles in the newspaper. So
Yeah.
I was like, this is an area of strength that maybe I can deploy. But it was, thinking back on it, that was a bold move. But luckily it paid off. Not
Yeah.
too much
The
to my
risks.
detriment.
Yeah, big
risks.
big risk to reward.
But then, yeah, I finished my course, graduated. I had some time off in between graduating my course and starting my first job. And there were a couple of things that happened in that time frame that I feel like I would want to talk about. But then I ended up in March 2018 starting at OC&C, which is a strategy consultancy here in London.
Amazing. So this is the part, because again, I know roughly your story, not in detail, but it's a question I've always wanted to ask and found it massively commendable. Going from a job that has a crazy trajectory, big salaries, very corporate, to completely going in a complete opposite direction.
Yeah.
A complete U-turn. Like, explain what that looked like and what the thought process was. And yeah, it just baffles me, but it's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that when I arrived at OC&C, and I was absolutely delighted, thrilled to have the job when I got the offer at university, and I was thrilled to be starting too. But after 2 months there, and it was only 2 months, it became quite clear to me that it was not the perfect fit
Right,
for me.
interesting.
And
why is that?
well, at the time, I don't really think I had a handle on it. I just knew that basically I was spending a lot of time, a little bit unhappy. I was working quite long hours. I wasn't thinking about it then, but I think I was also like quite rapidly putting on weight because we were having lots of takeaways, lots of nice sort of delivery meals that were expensed to the client, that kind of thing. I didn't find it nearly as interesting or rewarding as I'd hoped. I think, and I apologize to anyone listening to this who has been a client of a project I've worked on, but I didn't find myself really, really invested in the client's problems.
Right.
I didn't find...
Do you think it was the type of business or just because of the role?
Well, I think the role changed. So I got a few different tries at various parts of being a consultant, including kind of managing people, which I did enjoy a lot more. But fundamentally, I think you have an issue if you need to some degree take a problem and really internalize it and really care about it, to, as I was saying earlier, pursue it to the nth degree, like really find it interesting. And I never found it interesting. The bits of the job that I found interesting, and it's funny to kind of reflect on this now, but they were all of the things that involved creativity. And that was, it sounds ridiculous, but it was something like building an amazing Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, building something that was so cool, worked so well, you'd press F9 and you'd feel awesome about it. Like, it looked beautiful. That process of creativity and creating something that would impress other people, I found a lot more kind of enriching for my own esteem than anything to do with, oh, what does this Excel tell me about my client's problems? That jump I never really cared about. What I wanted to do was create something cool. And I found the same thing when I was making slides, because as a consultant, you're mainly either doing Excel or making slides. So when I would make slides, I was like, I just want these slides to look amazing. I don't really care what they say. I want them to engage someone by just like the look of them, the visual appeal. So I guess there must have come a point later in my OC&C career when I was like, you know, why do I like these parts of the job so much? Is it because I'm a massive maths nerd and love Excel? And I am a bit of a maths nerd, and I do love it. I do love Excel, but I don't think that was it. And I'd settled on the idea that it was the creativity that was doing it, and that actually, as you can imagine, is a pretty essential skill when you're starting a business and creating a product. So one of the amazing things that I've been able to experience through that creation process has been kind of the joy of putting myself out there and putting some design ideas out there and getting to work in my kitchen designing the recipe. But I think the most important thing about the reason I left, which I think is probably more your question, kind of what convinced you to leave this high-flying corporate job where you're paid a really good salary and you have amazing kind of prospects after, you work with really intelligent people, on paper a fantastic job. What makes you leave something like that? In the end, I had maybe 5 or 6 separate reasons, and I could stack them up and explain them to anyone that asked. And they were partly to do with the job itself, the fact that I wasn't super inspired by it, the fact that I didn't look at the people more senior to me and think, I really envy your life, the fact that I didn't feel like I was using some of the skills that I had, because towards the latter stages, I was doing some good like appraising of myself, which I would always encourage. It's the most important thing I think I've done when I've been choosing my career. You've got to figure out what gives you energy as a person, and don't just think of that in a professional context. For me, I've always loved meeting people and chatting to people. I've always loved making friends. I've always liked to be liked. I've always liked to be popular. And then I've also liked creating stuff, as I was just illustrating with the Excel and PowerPoint. So what I've really usefully done since leaving OC&C is find something to work on which harnesses both that love of meeting people and making friends, because it's essential in what I do to kind of onboard shops and make friends with shop managers and make friends with other people that own businesses and build your network, not in a networking way, but just like make new friends, you know? Yeah. And then obviously the creativity side, as I was saying before, on the recipe, on the design, creating a social media, whatever it might be. So those were all the things related to the job. I think there were maybe 3 of them distinct. And then separately, there were things that had happened and were happening in my personal life that just really brought home the idea of kind of life's too short. If you've got an opportunity, you should absolutely seize it. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say it's incredibly self-aware, it seems. You've looked at, and I think this is something that a lot of people listening could learn from. It's like, knowing what what drives you, what empowers you, what your purpose is. You realize that it was building things and, conversing, meeting people, building relationships. So, it's really interesting that, you were self-aware enough to see that and then take the plunge. Because I think you're right. Like, I think people, it's so upsetting when you see, and it happens so often. So many people are kind of stuck in that rat race, and it's so hard to get out of, and they've wanted to do this thing for so long, and they know that it's their true purpose but they haven't, they don't have the courage necessarily to go and do it. And it's so sad to see, because it's so true. Like, life's so short, realistically. Like, I'm a big believer in, what is the worst that can happen.
Yes. Exactly.
And I know it's very I want to preface that by saying it's very situational, because people in much harder situations than others, similarly to yourself, grew up in a loving family who, were successful, and we're very lucky in that sense, because a lot of people would never even have the opportunity, not even to live in a country like England, but as well, just to be able to know how to do that. So I think that's a really important thing to know. But yeah, it's really interesting that you saw that. So at what point then did you? So you've obviously had this realization, and I don't know how long that period was, but then when did you come to the decision of a beverage company? Or do you call it a beverage company? How would you describe it?
I don't really know how to describe it. Drinks,
Yeah,
beverages, all makes sense.
Yeah,
Bevs.
it's mainly because you mentioned health, so I don't know if it was. But
No. I would say I'd say bevies.
Yeah. But why a beverage company? Like, where did that aspect come from?
Well, I mean, the idea, it wasn't that I particularly love beverages or have always felt. To be honest, I mainly drink water. I've got a fridge full of my own product at home. I mainly drink water. Like, the product is good for anyone listening. That doesn't mean that the product is worse than water. But I've always been someone that has relatively simple taste. It's just that I had this idea, and the idea was because of me concurrently drinking ginger beers and ginger shots, noticing a huge kind of taste profile difference and a functional feeling difference. Ginger shots are healthy. It's a health drink. It gives you a really nice throat burn that makes you feel super well. And ginger beers, on the flip side, are soft drinks, sweet, often too fizzy, don't really taste like ginger. The worst offender, I think, is the Canada Dry ginger ale on the airplane that tastes absolutely nothing like ginger. Yeah. So I just thought, I couldn't really understand why there was this broad spectrum of ginger taste, and there were these two opposite ends and nothing in between. And I thought of the idea, or I guess I realized that I should do something about it, waking up from a general anesthetic operation. And that general anesthetic operation is kind of linked to one of my other reasons for wanting to start the business, which is it was in the wake of this incident in Japan where I very nearly lost my life. And there was. Can we go into that? Yeah, we can. I'm very happy to discuss it. It was a mixture of it was a whole mixture of stupidity and misfortune, and there was lots of emotion flying around, as you can imagine. So I was out in Japan. This was the time between finishing university and starting my first job, and I was out in Japan training to be a ski instructor. And the night I qualified, I should actually say I organised a sweepstake of beers for the person in our group, in our kind of cohort, that got the highest mark in their personal skiing. You were assessed on personal skiing, ability to teach, and also just like, I think it was, there was like a snowplow technique, so ability to teach learners specifically.
Right, okay.
So there was a teach where you had to teach something weird, like balancing a pole on another pole. There was a teach where you actually had to do a snowplow, and then there was your personal skiing. And I was like, the other two categories don't matter. It's all about the personal skiing. So I organised a sweepstake of beers. Everyone would put in a beer, and whoever got the highest mark in their personal skiing got all the beers. As it happened, I got the highest mark in my personal skiing, so it looked completely rigged because I'd organised the sweepstake only to take all the beers. I was celebrating, I was happy, I was quite drunk, and then unfortunately my jacket, my kind of quite thick jacket, because in Japan on Hokkaido it was quite cold, got pinched from the club we were at, and I need to go home. So I started walking, realised it was really cold, and then started jogging. And in the process of jogging over the road, I was all of 50 meters from safety, from my accommodation. I actually slipped in the road, and it was also very bad visibility. It was a bit of a blizzard. And then a car came and hit me directly in the leg. And all that happened was I broke my leg. To be honest, that was a huge stroke of luck, because if the car had hit me in the head or chest, I would have probably died instantly, because it was going quite fast. So yeah, just escaped with a leg break. But in the aftermath, so my dad, who's an absolute hero, flew out to Japan immediately when I first got hit by the car, because there was a time interval between the original accident and then me having an operation to have kind of metal put in my leg to stabilize it so that the bone could regrow. It's kind of normal internal fixation for a broken bone. And so my dad was out there with me. I was delighted to see him. Then I had this operation. The metal went into my leg. Immediately after the operation, I had a really severe complication with my lungs. And I had no idea what was happening. I woke up one morning with a bit of a fever. Well, woke up the morning after the operation with a bit of a fever, and I was whisked around. They did loads of scans. No one really told me what was going on. I was taken to this huge room full of every doctor I'd ever seen in the hospital. And I was like, something's going down here. This is really, something's like afoot. This is bad. And I thought they were going to have to amputate my leg. And I was really scared and really worried about that. The truth, I guess, was retrospectively better, but at the time worse, which is they basically said, your life's in a huge amount of danger. We need to transfer you to a different hospital with a intensive care unit so that we can save your life. And I can't really remember. I don't remember the whole episode super well. It's kind of been shoved right to the back of my memory. But my dad was kind of on his way over to the hospital, so I insist that they didn't put me to sleep because they had to put me in a medically induced coma with a breathing tube and everything. I insisted that they didn't do that until I'd seen my dad and had kind of given him a hug. But then I had to do probably the most difficult thing I've ever done, which is call my mum and call my two brothers and chat to them and say, hey, I don't really know what's going on or what's going to happen. But just in case kind of things go south, I love you lots and bye. And it was obviously heartbreaking. And yeah, it was a bit mad. And at that point I was put to sleep, and I feel a lot of guilt for my parents because they were obviously still awake. And while I was being transferred and when I arrived at the new hospital, the news wasn't good. They thought I was going to die, and they communicated that to my dad in a not entirely tactful way, but I suppose there is a language barrier. And my dad told my mum, and they were distraught. And then I just turned a corner and was fine. And now my lungs are completely fine too. I had to still deal with a broken leg, which was unfortunate because I came out of this experience. I was delirious from so many drugs, and I was like, oh, I've survived, like amazing. There's some funny footage and photos from around the time of me just like being completely incoherent. But then I still had a broken leg, which was a bit of a shame because I sort of expected that to vanish.
Take it
along with, yeah, absolutely. But
so that almost had a connection then when you when you were self-aware enough to think this is a short life.
Yeah, I think so. It as I said, life's too short. It's exactly that sort of mentality. And when I was unhappy as a consultant and over COVID, you're left with the bare bones of what you're doing. You don't get kind of the office or the culture or the people, your friends. I thought life is too short to spend all of my time stressed, working long hours, pretty miserable, dreading the week that's coming up. When you work as at any age, work is a large portion of your time as a percentage. And as a consultant, it was an even larger portion of my time because the hours were so long. So I realized quite quickly that because I'd been given I felt like I still to this day feel like I've been given a second chance, a second crack at doing something awesome with life. And I am determined to try my best to do something awesome before I give up on it. And very luckily for me, I also have the capability to do it, as I kind of alluded to right at the start of this. I'm very, very privileged and very lucky, which puts me in an unreal position to start a business. It's kind of the mentality I got into at the end of the day was it's rude not to. It's rude not to try. And
especially in your 20s. you never have less risks than you do in your 20s.
Exactly, and the responsibilities that we were talking about earlier, you have no responsibilities at school. Unless you're already married and have a kid in your mid-20s, and I'm sure that there are lots of people that do have weighty responsibilities or the responsibilities of their parents, there are restrictive things in people's lives, and even people I know, that will stop them from doing something really out there or risky. But I'm lucky enough to have lived a really quite stable, pretty like nonchalant existence up to now. So I thought, why not just kind of give this a bit of a shot? And particularly with the background I've just mentioned, it kind of, as I said, felt rude not to. And then the one final thing, which I guess was an important, looking back on it, an important point, is my dad, who I love very much and am incredibly proud of, during my first year at OC&C, he actually fell quite seriously ill, and he's doing really well, but he has a brain tumor, and it started off looking really, really bad. Like he had maybe 6 months to live, and we're now at the kind of 3.5 year mark, and he's doing really well, enjoying life. We've just been on holiday, so everything is looking really good for the time being, which is fantastic. But at the time, we were really, really worried. And I remember there was one evening that my dad tried to reach me on my mobile. This was shortly after his diagnosis, maybe 1 or 2 months. And I was so busy modeling in an Excel spreadsheet for page 213 of a PowerPoint deck that 2 people in the world would ever read in my management consulting job, that I didn't answer a call from my father. And I look back on that with such shame, because given the broader context, it's totally insane for me not to pick up that telephone call and put aside my stress and my numbers and my maths for 1 minute. But the environment I was in that job, and the way it made me feel, because I know lots of people that are very successful as management consultants that maybe don't feel this as keenly as I do, but the way it made me feel was like I couldn't pick up that phone from my dad, who at that point it looked like had a terminal cancer that would have him dying in a very short time frame. And I decided that was just totally unacceptable. And as I said, I look back on it with huge amounts of shame and now pride, because it's forced me to do something about it. If I want to spend time with my parents now, and if my parents frankly want to spend time with me, I will make it happen. I have the flexibility in my current mode of working to always see them for breakfast, for dinner, whatever it might be. If they need help, my dad's quite disabled still, so he moves around in a wheelchair and with a frame. If he needs help to get from A to B, if he wants to do something, he wants to go to a concert or wants to go and see someone, I will do everything in my power to make that happen. And it's an immense source of pride for me that I can.
I think it's so important. I always try and realign gratitude, and realistically, I've said this so many times on this podcast now, but just in the grand scheme of things, if things are going wrong with your business, or you missed the train that day, or whatever the fuck it is, in the grand scheme of things, if the people you love are healthy and safe and happy, like nothing else matters. And I think it's so important to realign that, because it's so easy to get caught in this crossfire of your professional life and things going on in your personal life. But realistically, it's such an important thing to realign.
Yeah, I agree. I think the crossfire is hugely distracting, and it feels super important, and it's very difficult to extricate yourself from that and develop some perspective in the moment. And what I seek to do always now, and I think I've really borrowed this from someone else. I think I borrowed it from a Charlie Mackesy book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which I think is phenomenal. But I think he says at one point, the greatest freedom is how we react to things. And I firmly believe that. I think the best you can do as a person is to react to things in a calm, measured way, with the appropriate amount of emotion and context, regardless of what else is going on. And you need to create a sort of shield or a bubble around yourself that means that regardless of what's going on in your professional or personal life, you can always center yourself and figure out, actually, what are my priorities here? And if you're in a job that stops you prioritizing in the right way, or in a way that you look back on in 1 week's time and think, God, like, what the hell was I doing? Then you need to, I think, do something about it.
Yeah, 100%. I think constantly evaluating those situations is key, because we're all fucking human, aren't we? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think you could be the most self-aware person and have that mindset, but I don't know if you've heard of the book The Chimp Paradox. We've all got a chimp inside us, and you've got your computer, which is your more logical, slower processing way of thinking, but then your chimp instantly tries to take over first, and it's our chimp instincts, and it's a lot more emotional way of reacting. So it's so important to take a step back and control the chimp before you make your decision.
Yeah, I think just not letting the chimp out at important times is key. Yeah, suppress is the wrong word, but like, keep the chimp calm, like placate the chimp, whatever the chimp needs.
Well, it's the thing about, like, don't ever make a decision on I can't remember the phrase, but it's almost like sleep on it before you make the decision.
Yeah.
If you're feeling emotional and you are in an argument, or looking to make a rash decision, sleep on it first.
Agree.
And see how you feel. So I think it's about time we got onto the brand then.
Yeah,
so,
sorry.
It's been great. It's
exclusively
been great.
Not about the brand. I'm so
but
sorry.
No, it's the story. It's not just about the root co. It's about you, and now we're there. So let's talk a bit about that then. What did the early stages of the business look like? How did you attack it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it being actually a pretty phenomenal time, particularly during the first 2 months when I was making lots of recipes at home. I was cycling them out to my friends across London, including your girlfriend Helena.
Yeah, I remember the video.
Yeah.
I actually took the piss out of her for that, because her review was very gingery.
Yeah.
No shit, it's ginger beer.
It was.
That's literally what she said. And she's like,
I also remember
gingery.
she made sorry Helena, but she made a really funny like noise. It was like or something like that on the video. I was like, it sticks in my mind.
Love it.
But so I remember those early days where I was basically didn't have a clue of how I would do anything. Nothing had got particularly serious yet. All I was trying to do was create a product in my kitchen that people liked, and then figure out a way to scale it and make it into cans. And I was doing those things kind of simultaneously. So making lots of batches in my kitchen, cycling them out to my friends across London. It was really nice as well, because we'd just come out of lockdown, or we were still kind of in lockdown. So I was doing outdoor tastings with everyone, and I hadn't seen most of these people in months, because it had been such a weird year of coronavirus. So that was a real joy anyway. And then I would take little photos and videos, and I had never really had Instagram before, so I was still figuring that out.
Was this the final recipe then, or were you testing different?
No, definitely testing.
So how the fuck do you even approach that? Like, were you looking online ginger beer recipes and just kind of go? What did that look like?
Yeah, so it started, for context, I left my job in February 2021, but in sort of August 2020, I'd started making a lightly fermented ginger beer batch.
Right.
And that was just from a recipe online that broadly gave me the ratios of how much ginger to how much acidity to then how much something sweet, so how much sweetener. Yeah. And I think that allowed me then to sort of tweak it, and I knew that I wanted to create a health drink at the end of the day, so I knew that I couldn't ferment it and create something alcoholic. And so I guess fast forward lots of recipes and lots of doing and thinking about how I was going to source the ingredients and all of this. I was basically still trying to figure out a nice ratio between the ginger, the lime. I added mint at quite a late stage. And then
I think that's a nice touch, by the way. When I was drinking it in Angel on Saturday, it really comes through, and I think it makes the taste more unique.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, thank you very much, first of all. But I think lots of people, when they try the drink, immediately say that's different. They're not expecting it to taste as it does. And I don't think it actually tastes like many other drinks I've tried. And it definitely doesn't taste like regular ginger beer, which is quite exciting. It's got a unique flavor, and I think the kind of menthol in the mint and the gingery firiness at the back of your throat sort of complement each other in a nice way. So yeah, I guess I was just doing all this recipe development. I was trying to get my street trading license for a stall on Camden Passage. I got that kind of process in the works. I was dealing with Islington Local Council, and I'm sorry to all the local councils, but none of them are particularly fast. Processes take a while, so I was aware of the lead time, and I just got my application in. And then basically through this sampling with friends, I refined the recipe, and then I had my street trading license, got out on my first market stall, started selling ginger beer and getting people's feedback, and that helped me to really pinpoint where the recipe was going. And as I said before, in the background, kind of simultaneously, I was figuring out, okay, what bits of kit do I need to produce the drink at scale? Who am I going to work with to do this? Because you need a canning line, which costs loads of money and won't fit in my flat. So it became pretty obvious that I needed to work with a co-manufacturer. I also, one of the smartest things I did right at the start was, and it wasn't particularly smart, but just speak to loads of people who had either started businesses or were in the industry.
Yeah,
because
right.
I now feel like I know a lot more, or like it's just sort of, there are these bits of how to produce a drink that I feel like this is just common knowledge. It's definitely not common knowledge. When I first started out, I didn't have a clue. I didn't even know that you needed to work with the co-manufacturer. I was like, I want to make my own ginger beer factory. But then I
think that's the thing though, and that's such an important point, because one of the reasons people don't start things, and I remember when I was leaving the company I was at previously to start my own business, even a lot of the management team were like, you don't know how to do that yet. You're too young. Stay a bit longer, and you can gain a bit more experience before you go and do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, how, even just down to tax, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
How do you? And I think a lot of people, it halts or hinders their, the starting of something, because they're so fixed on the idea of all these questions and how do I do this, how do I do that, when really that just hinders actually getting started. Action is so important, and you can learn as much as you need to before you start and do this and that, but I think getting in the trenches is so important. And no, you don't know shit before you put yourself in the deep end. You need to just do that. And no one was an expert of anything until they just got in and tried it and learned, by trial and error and failure.
Yeah, I honestly agree 100%. I think the best thing for starting a business is, ironically, just to put yourself in the mode, and as long as you feel motivated by your idea, you will find a way, and you'll be surprised how far you can get by speaking to friends of friends and doing a bit of Googling, and just like using, I don't know, I do all the accounting for my business, and I basically just use a bit of software called Xero, and it makes things really straightforward for me. And if I ever have something that's not making a load of sense, then I will Google it and figure out an answer. If I get really, really stuck, I'm very lucky to have friends who are accountants that I can
exactly
ask.
Or like for me, I just once you're making a little bit of money, if that's something you really don't know how to do or don't enjoy doing or can't do, outsource it. Get an accountant. It will cost you a couple £100 a month, but
absolutely.
And that's what I did, to be honest, pretty early on. We use Xero as well, but I don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm sure I've made a load of mistakes, and I file VAT returns, so maybe they'll be uncovered some years later, and I'll be sent to jail for fraud. Who knows? It's honestly a possibility. But I do think that the attitude of go for it, and you will figure it out. As long as you're doing something that you enjoy and something that kind of keeps you happy and content, and something that you want to stay doing, you will kind of fight for it in a really measurable way. You will figure out answers to questions that you didn't think answerable. You will find people to contact that you didn't think were contactable. It's you do just make it work one way or another, and that's kind of the tenacity and perseverance thing.
Yeah, you just make it happen because you have to.
Yeah.
Rather than if it's before you've started, it's much harder to to learn those things because you're not in the deep end. You don't necessarily have to. You can continue hindering that. So
yeah, I agree.
It's a good point.
I agree.
So we kind of going back to that development phase then.
Yeah. And I'll actually try and speed you through kind of how that, because I'm aware, like we've been talking now for a while, and I'll try and speed you through how the business has kind of been going and how it's all developed since then. So to start with, yes, I was just doing it up in my kitchen, developing the recipe. I bought a big juicer. I found a co-manufacturer to work with. They're down in Devon. They will do all of the kind of blending and the blending, the carbonating and the canning for me. I had to buy a big juicer. So all of my fresh ingredients get loaded into the juicer, juice comes out, and that is mixed into the drink. That's kind of a bit of a USP, although there were a couple of challenges I'll talk about in a sec. So basically once I had a recipe that I'd settled on my kitchen, I started buying ingredients. I do all the supply chain stuff myself, so I sourced the ingredients, and I wanted them always to be single origin, so quite traceable, because at some point I know I'm going to need to calculate my carbon footprint and try and do something to become either carbon neutral or try and get a B Corp accreditation. So it's really important that transparency kind of exists. And basically, I did a trial production with my co-manufacturer in Devon. I was put onto this particular co-manufacturer who have been, to be honest with you, totally brilliant. There have been loads of issues and they've helped me solve them by a guy called James, who works for another drinks business. He was the friend of a sister's friend, some weird connection, but we're now good friends, and he really helped me at the start. And I had this trial run and it all looked really brilliant, except there was an issue with kind of what's referred to as the microbiology in the can. That means that the cans weren't kind of safe to be sealed and put on a shelf over time, because there were biological bits in there. So that's bacteria or yeast or fungi that would eventually spoil the drink over time and render it unsafe to drink, which is a big problem and not something I thought would happen, because you usually have a standard practice for kind of treating a drink after you make it, which is to drop it in a water bath for 10 minutes at 75 degrees, and that pasteurizes it and removes any signs of kind of bacterial or microbiological life. However, that standard process didn't do it for me. So suddenly I went from a position of, oh, cool, I've done my trial production, the drinks taste great, to they're unsafe. What the hell am I going to do about this? And therein started an unbelievably stressful week of unmitigated terror, risk, like loads of things going wrong all in 1 week. I'm not going to take you through the
day to day,
the whole of it, but it was pretty stressful. It was touch and go whether I'd be able to start a business at all, because what I had in the cans from my trial production, as I said, was unsafe. It couldn't be sold to anyone. It couldn't even really be consumed past 2 weeks. So I then was rapidly trying to figure out solutions. I sent some product to Newcastle. It was put in like a pressurized chamber and exploded. I then went back to the guys down in Devon who are still my co-manufacturers. They're called Bottled and Canned. And we just took a massive punt to reduce the fill level in the can because we had an issue with cans where the bottoms were popping. The pressure was too high in the can, and the bottoms, which are usually concave, were going to convex. That was an issue in trial production before we even realized there was a microbiological issue. So we reduced the fill level, which meant that was less likely to happen, because if the bottom pops, you can't sell them either. And then heated them to a high temperature, just hoping, praying that those two things in combination would mean that the bottom of the cans didn't pop and that the liquid then was safe to drink. And by an absolute miracle, that's what came to pass. And it was very, very lucky. It was not super scientifically thought out. And now that's just the way I produce. Now it's just like, oh, great, cool. I know how to produce the drink. So by the start of May, after all this drama and, to be honest, total euphoria, being able to produce a drink at scale that I'd made in my kitchen and launch a website and all of this, I finally kind of had cans in production. And I guess that was the start of kind of the business in earnest.
Yeah, so one thing I do want to get onto, because you've taken very much a traditional route in retail. Obviously, we're more of a digital-focused agency. We work with a lot of e-com brands. It's almost become the norm now that you start online, and then if you've got a successful product, you eventually try and you expand that into retail.
Sure.
You have very much gone the traditional route. Talk a bit about that thought process, and what your strategy is, just from the start, and then kind of for moving ahead now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier on when we were chatting, I am more of a doer than a kind of strategizer. Even though I work for a strategy consultancy, there is some irony there. So what I decided at the beginning was a great way to immediately get my product out to kind of family, friends, people interested. And make no mistakes, you're not selling to a huge market when you first start. You're selling to people that have been involved in your journey so far, are interested to try your product, people that are keen to support you. So launching an online business or having an online platform to start with is a brilliant idea. I also retained my stall where I originally was doing product development as a way to kind of market the business and as a way to frankly sell cans too. And I still trade there every Sunday, and I absolutely love it because you just meet new people.
It's one of
you get feedback.
Something you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of relationship building, right?
Absolutely. I think
it's your passion.
Yeah, and I think it's the single best thing I do to market the business as well. There are lots of people I've met at my stall who have become, I would guess, I would say friends, and also kind of in that super fan camp of people you need, people that are going to advocate the product on your behalf, people that are going to expand its reach just by virtue of kind of who you are and the product you've created, which is the most rewarding thing when people like your drink enough to tell their family and their friends about it. When you, as a business owner, hear about that anecdotally, like, oh, I first tried this because my aunt came to the stall and picked up a few cans and brought them to a party with me and my family. It's like, it's crazy and really awesome to hear always. So anyway, those are both kind of direct to consumer models, the stall and online. And since then, I've made a really concerted effort to try and get into shops, because I think fundamentally, if you've got a drink in a can, the best way for you to distribute it is kind of that, oh, I'm kind of fancy a cold drink today, let me sweep one up off the shelf.
And that's how you learn about the brand. It's much harder. I do agree that with Beverage, seeing an advert on TikTok for a drink, it's hard to market something like that. Like you say, it's almost that first time, second time, it's an impulse buy when you're quenching that thirst, and then you grow to love a product.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I've tried lots of things with marketing. I've always been determined to give things a go, kind of throw lots at the wall and see what sticks, that kind of approach. But I have still found no better way to market the product than just getting people to try it in front of me. I now do lots of samplings in the Planet Organics, which I work with.
Yeah, that's a crazy.
So yeah, I'll talk you through how that happened as well, because that is a bit nuts, and a series of fortunate events combined with the right kind of approach too. So basically, my journey with retail has been in May. I'd launched it's May 2021, just over a year ago. I'd launched my first cans, and then kind of halfway through that month, I was like, actually, I thought the hard work was over when I created the product and launched an online business.
Always the way.
It's actually only just begun. And I was also grappling with lots of different emotions at the time, because you involve lots of people when you start a business like this, and there are people that talk to you about it. And one of the things I found most difficult is what I would call, and this is a little bit uncomfortable to speak about, but what I would call friend failure. So people that are friends of yours, people that you've known for a long time, who are kind of, they will say that they're interested in your business, they will ask you questions about it, but they don't do anything tangibly to support you. And I don't fault, at the time I found that really difficult, and I developed a little bit of animosity towards certain people who I felt like hadn't had said they would support my business and hadn't, or who I'd felt like should be and hadn't. But now I just reflect on it like, you know, first of all, ginger beer is not for everyone. Secondly, I'm not for everyone. Thirdly, lots of stuff goes on in people's lives. They are too busy to give two monkeys about you and your ginger beer business, or you and your whatever business. So
there's a phrase I always like to say when it's kind of in a slightly different context, but you know, everyone's so obsessed when they go to school or to work about that spot and people noticing or, you know, making fun of them, but really they don't notice your spot because they're too worried about their own.
Yeah, exactly. I just think people are involved in their own lives. Understandably, I'm involved in my own life too. And not everyone is so empathetic to be like, wow, he's a small business owner. Maybe I should like buy some product or like some stuff on Instagram or do small things to help out. They are too busy trying to figure out their own stuff. Plus, when you add into that the fact that I'm insanely lucky to be starting a business in my mid-20s, I'm sure lots of my friends would like to be doing the same. They look at my life with, I don't know, a degree of like fantastic for Will that he's doing this business. I kind of wish I could have that opportunity too. It might be envy. I wouldn't want to say these people are jealous of me because I don't think that's the full story.
Especially when from the outside, not knowing how fucking hard it is being a business owner.
Absolutely, but you can certainly understand that lots of people would see me out on my bicycle delivering to stores and be like, "Oh, that kind of looks great." Well, I'm sat in my office, kind of having a shit time.
But that is social media, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's like anything. You only see the good parts of anything and anyone and any business.
Yeah, and I've actually grown to believe that social media is criticized a lot for people using it as their highlights reel. But I actually think that it goes a little bit further than that, where, yes, usually on social media, you post the good stuff, and I credit people that also post the bad stuff. It's always really refreshing to see. But I think you, as a consumer of that content, will always fantasize, you will always grass is greener it, to the point where you will feel envy regardless of like the underlying message of whatever you're seeing. It's hard, but I think we are so, as humans, and I am totally as well, really prone to grass is greener. Wouldn't it be better over there? Wouldn't it be better doing that? You know, what if? Anyway, complete tangent, but I basically was grappling with the emotions of, I thought all the hard work was done. I thought my friends would be really supportive. Some of them were, some of them weren't. That's hard. But now the work really begins. So I put on a backpack, loaded it with a load of samples, and started speaking to stores. And I guess to lots of people that would feel like maybe an intimidating process to kind of pitch. I've never seen it as pitching. I've just thought about it as making friends, like we were discussing earlier. And that's not even like a marketing line. It's not like, God, every store owner is my friend. I just think about it as I have to get someone to like me, and I'm actually really interested in learning about this retail too, because it's a world I'm entering, and these people will be my partners if they choose to list my product. It's really important I understand their needs and what's going on in their life and what drives traffic for them and ways in which I can support them too.
It's two things, and it comes empathy and curiosity, and I think they're two really big things in networking and what are really important, because you know, if you go in with this narrow-minded, singular approach of I'm just building this relationship for an outcome, it's never going to work out. You know, if you go into something and try and either offer value with nothing expected in return, or just for the nature of being curious about what they're doing, or empathetic to their story and their situation and wanting to actually build a meaningful relationship, it's far more likely you're going to build something great there.
I agree. And even if, you know, my goal for going into these stores is transactional, which is, I guess that is the reason I'm setting foot in their door. But if you can show to them that you are more than just, hey, I want to sell my product to you. And if you as a person, to your core, actually are interested in their lives and interested in what's going on, as you were saying, they're curious, then I think the combination can yield to quite a good part, or give way to quite a good partnership.
So
and
what, on that then, what advice do you have for someone who maybe is a little bit more of an introvert, how do they, because again, I get messages like this quite a lot, you know, how do you go out and network? How do you build your network? How can you put yourself out there? You're a very sociable extrovert, and so, you know, you're very good at conversing. What advice do you have for someone who maybe isn't so gifted in that space?
Well, first of all, I'd say that I'm actually shockingly an introvert.
Really?
Yeah, like
Interesting.
when I'm struggling the most, all I want to do is spend time by myself. I don't get huge amounts of energy from being around other people when I'm in a certain frame of mind. Under ordinary circumstances, I love meeting new people, which is why I think lots of people are like, this guy's an extrovert. He's super fun, bubbly, lovely, energetic, like fun to be around. However, like to your question, what advice would I give? The most important thing is kind of remembering people's interests, like just doing what you can to listen to what people have to say. One of the smartest things I always do whenever I'm doing kind of field sales or meeting people is just make a note, the store name, and then make a note of who always ask someone's name so that you know who they are and you can ask for them next time. And if you can remember something about their life or what they've told you, remember something about their store, something they're passionate or interested about, then that just immediately creates a much better relationship than if you're just there being like, oh, fridge is nice. Could do with a couple of new cans, couldn't it?
It's so funny you say that, because that exact technique, when I left university and went into advertising and sales, that was the first technique they told me. When you're building relationships with clients, note down, ask them how they are, their personal life, and note down, you know, they've got a wedding, they're getting married on this day, they're doing this on this day. Note that down and then start the conversation with that next time. So
yeah,
that is actually a sales technique.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm not surprised. Like, ideally, you would care enough to commit it to memory. But the bits that you might find hard, because you obviously meet a lot of people when you're traveling around to various stores, the bits like names, try and organize that in a way where if you return to that store in a month's time, you can flick up a note, you know the person's name that you spoke to, and ideally you recognize them because you've spoken to them before. But to be honest, I've had situations like earlier today I was doing a sampling at Planet Organic Spitalfields, and I'd met a girl called Jennifer, really kind of when I first launched with Planet Organic, and there was a lady there kind of working on the shelves. I could see she had store manager written on her name badge. She was called Jen, and I was like, oh, hey, how are you doing? I'm here for a sampling. And she was like, hey, remind me what brand you're from again? I was like, oh, I'm Will, I'm from the Root Co. And she was like, oh yeah, I remember. And then I was suddenly like, shit, Jen is Jennifer. Amazing. Who would have thought? Like, I definitely should have twigged before then. It was actually quite unintelligent. But then I kind of chatted to her about that original kind of launch, and she knew that I'd done this thing where I cycled to all of the Planet Organics in a day, like all of the stores. That was
cool. That was very cool.
That was a fun idea.
They should have sponsored that, because it's good publicity for them as well.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
So
fun.
talk about that, because that's a huge relationship you've built there. Talk about how that came about.
Yeah, I will. So basically, as I said before, I had kind of my backpack samples, lots of cafes, stores, delis, and I'd kind of built up a reasonable amount of momentum by kind of midsummer, maybe July, and I mentioned earlier, both my brothers got married last year, and one of the cool things we did for my middle brother's wedding, Tom's wedding, was we went and got matching suits, which was pretty phenomenal. So we went to a tailor's, and when me and my middle brother were waiting to get our suits fitted, we went to this little cafe opposite called The Service. This is on Savile Row. To be honest, we're very lucky that my parents were happy to sponsor the suit fitting. Otherwise, the suit fitting would not have happened, certainly from my end. So we were there in a cafe in Savile Row, and just chilling there. I was like, oh, this might be a fun place to drop samples one day. And then suit fitting happened, passed, completely forgot about it. Then one of my housemates from Bristol, actually my third year, so not when Helena and I were living together, I went over to her house for dinner, and her housemate also happens to work at a tailor's on Savile Row, and was chatting to me about the cafe there and was like, oh my God, I really like your ginger beer. You should definitely get it stocked in this cafe. I was like, maybe I should. And through her, I managed to get a somewhat warm lead into this cafe on Savile Row, the service. Anyway, I turned up there, dropped samples, and turned up 2 or 3 more times to collect feedback and speak to the team there. That kind of persistent or perseverant approach has been so important, and is really actually quite hard and soul crushing at points.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you want people, when you hand over your number, you want them to be like, wow, that was a good product. Let me immediately text this guy and order some. Never happens. No one has ever contacted me on phone, I don't think, in like a whole year of doing this field sales. You have to turn up in person again. Try and meet the people you met before. Try and chat to them. If you don't meet the person you met before, meet someone else. Make sure that they kind of feed the message back. A kind of physical reminder. So
yeah, you've got to be that's so true. You've got to be so thick-skinned in this game, and it's
dogged and thick-skinned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you just can't be ashamed to just continue being, like you said, persistent.
And I think you realise quite quickly that the reason that they haven't contacted you is not that they don't like your drink. It's just that they've got 1,000,001 things to do in their day, so they've completely forgotten about it. And frankly, like getting
like any business.
Yeah, like any business. But getting in for a cafe, for an operating cafe, the vast majority of the time and emphasis in a single day is spent on the operations of the cafe, making sure everyone gets served, making sure they've got inventory of everything. Getting new listings is like maximum 2 or 1% of the energy they want to spend on a single day. So you might be one of, I don't know, 3 prospective suppliers in a week. So you have to do the hard bit, which is turn up again and again until you get a firm answer. And if that answer's no, you take it graciously and thank them for their feedback. If that answer's yes, then fantastic, you've got a sale. And that's brilliant. So that's exactly what happened with this cafe called The Service. Then an absolute stroke of fortune, the manager of the service, it happens to be married to someone that's involved in Planet Organic. This was something I actually knew when I first got listed there, because I've had in the background an amazing woman called Chloe, who I met at one of my first market stalls. She's been following my Instagram and following my process, and has been giving me kind of cheeky little sneak hints behind the scenes, because she liked me, liked the product, thought, you know, it could go a reasonable distance. And I'm honestly thrilled to be sat here and tell you that I've now engaged her in a kind of professional capacity to help work. Well, she's part of an agency, and she's now helping me kind of get more listings and helping with my distribution, which is really a proud moment for me that I've managed to engage her properly rather than just taking her free amazing advice. Anyway, she told me that the manager of this store, called Marcel, was married to Caroline, who works at Planet Organic. And I just kind of knew this information. And at one point I messaged Marcel being like, hey, is there any way that I could, I've got a load of inventory that's going off soon. Is there any way that I can distribute it to Planet Organic stores, just to give it a platform? Like, happy to kind of do the cans at like half price or kind of for free, just to get them out there. And nothing kind of came of that. Anyway, sort of went away. I then continued working with the service, and they placed several orders, and the products were moving really well. And because I do all my deliveries by bicycle and turn up there in person every time I deliver, I know the staff quite well. I know the team. They're really, really nice. It's Claudio, Lucy, Tonya. They're just a really nice team, and we always have like a bit of a chat, and then I hand over the product, and then I'm on my way on my bicycle. Anyway, I happened to be delivering in a week in December where they're about to have their Christmas party, and I think it was Lucy and Claudia who were like, oh, you should definitely come to the Christmas party. Like, why not? So I was like, oh, that's really kind of you to invite me. I'll definitely come to the Christmas party. I went. I spent the vast majority of my time talking to this random tailor from Savile Row about kind of cloth procurement, which I found fascinating, but it was totally unrelated to me, my business. It was just interesting. And then I kind of became aware that not only was Marcel the store manager there, but also his wife was from Planet Organic. And before I left there, because I had something else I was going to something else I was going to after, I made sure to speak to Caroline, and she was there with her colleague Eva as well, and just chat to her a little bit and introduce myself. She'd coincidentally tried one of my drinks that very day, really liked it. So I noted down her email and started copying her in to my emails to the buying team, which I'd already been sending for maybe a month and getting no response. And Caroline, who's absolutely lovely, fantastic person, then started replying to me with the buyers also in CC, and then I managed to get one of them to agree to a sample drop in January. I then emailed them in January. I was like, hey, I'm interested in dropping samples. When works for you guys? No reply. I was like, I'm thinking of dropping samples on this particular day. Is that cool? Will anyone be in? No reply. I was then like, I'm going to drop samples. No reply. I've now dropped the samples. And then Caroline was like, thank you for dropping the samples, because again, the buyers hadn't responded. Then I guess because a combination of having the warm lead through Caroline, who, as I mentioned, is absolutely brilliant, and I also made quite a big effort with my samples. So I packaged them up in a nice recyclable mailer, and where it's recycled and recyclable. And I also scented them with ginger oil, which is a really strong scent. And that, I think, immediately makes your sample stand out. So I was just trying to go for a bit of that wow factor. They tried the drinks, really liked them, and then it was just kind of process from there. But I got the new.
So what I find crazy is the resilience. Just it's really difficult, isn't it, when you're not getting any response, to continue to push forward.
Yeah, I think it is. In this particular case, I was like, Planet Organic are the ones I want to shoot for. Like, they are in my. Honestly, I line them up from maybe 2-3 months into business, being like, this would be my ideal kind of retailer of note, chain of note to list with. And I thought, I've got a foot in the door here. I've met Caroline, this fortuitous circumstance. I'm not going to let it slide easily. Yeah. So that's why I still dropped the samples, even though no one had asked me to. And then, I was very lucky that they liked them. And then, as I said, it was just processed. The most amazing thing about the story is that I got the news that I had the Planet Organic listing when I was away on holiday with my family. And as you may have already gathered, I'm close with my family. I love them all very much, and that extends also to my brothers, now wives too. So we were there, my parents, my brothers, their wives, and me on a ski trip in France, which was an amazing trip anyway. And I got this news just before dinner. I headed down, and then I told them all, and I burst into tears. I was,
oh mate,
yeah, it was mental. It's since my accident in Japan, when things happen, significant things happen that make me think, God, I'm lucky to be alive, or how much I love. It's particularly around my family, I think, because they were the parties I was most sensitive to during that Japan incident, obviously, because I broke the news to my mum and my brothers just before I was put in a coma, and somehow there are just a switch flicks in my brain and I will just start crying. And it was a combination of hard work and relief and everything, and just joy as well. And to be celebrating with them, I was absolutely delighted. But yeah, I cried my eyes out. I had no idea what was happening. I had no control.
Mate, that's beautiful. I think that's what comes with, the pure passion that goes into building something. Such a pure thing, isn't it? Just the fact of something that doesn't exist, to bringing something into existence with an idea, to then making it into a concept, to then actually making it into a physical product, to then actually getting it listed in somewhere like that. Like they're the moments that kind of tell you you're doing something right.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's spot on. And because I'd been so keen to work with Planet Organic, it's not like I'd cast the net really wide, like I dropped off samples with loads and loads of retailers. I really, really wanted this. And then for it to land when I was on holiday with my family, it felt like an amazing, amazing moment. And yeah, pure emotion. I think, as we've touched on, it does take a lot of emotional resilience, a thick skin to get through these steps that need your perseverance, that need you not to take things personally, that need you to handle rejection. Yeah. And when something like that lands, your kind of thick skin can sort of melt away and expose, for me, just like loads and loads of tears and joy at being with my family and celebrating this news. And yeah, so now I've been working with the Planet Organic stores since March, and I do lots of samplings with them. Every time I do a sampling session, some of them are super quiet, some of them are really busy, but it does provide a really nice physical reminder of the distance I've come. It's amazing to be stood in a Planet Organic store sampling my drinks and to see my drinks up on the shelf. I don't get the same buzz I did on like that first day, which is a shame, because I would anything. I would love to still feel that. But before, as we were discussing before we even started the podcast, you do have an obsession with kind of what comes next. It's hard to always sit back and reflect on how far you've come and the journey you've been on. But
it's really difficult, but it is really important. And I don't do it enough. You know, it's really,
no one does. No one does. It's hard. It's hard when you're ambitious. The other thing I want to mention quickly off the Planet Organic thing. So I've maybe been back in London after holiday for a week or so, and I've been trying really hard to get into this chain of bakeries called Euphorium, which is where you picked up a ginger beer can on the weekend. I've been speaking to them for about 6 months, sort of emailing back and forth, and another really lucky circumstance, my drinks had really got featured in the Times as part of an article on this app called Deli, which has been started by the guy that founded Depop. Had like a bit of a publicity buzz around it, and they'd included a little picture of my cans because I work with Deli as one of the first kind of makers or producers they had on the app. And I was sent a load of messages. This was also happened to be on the ski tour, which has turned out to be pretty phenomenal, not only for the skiing, but also for like business reasons. I was sent some messages being like, oh, by the way, Will, your ginger beer's in the Times. I was like, madness, had no idea this was happening. As it happened, the guy that's in charge of making the stocking the decisions for Euphorium Bakery had seen that article, read it, seen the ginger beer, was reminded of me in my emails. And then when I recontacted him after the holiday, decided that he wanted to go for it. Yeah. And to have those two things happen in the space of 2 weeks, because I'd been really trying to chase a chain for a while, you know, multiple sites. The most I'd had from a stockist up until that point was 2. I'd had a couple of shops with 2 different sites, but to then get not only Planet Organic, but also this amazing chain of bakeries called Euphorium, which I know from where I live in Angel, and also I'd grown up with around kind of Belsize Park and Hampstead, where I grew up, was absolutely phenomenal.
It normally happens like that. You put in so much work, and there's always this delayed reward, as it were. And I do think what separates people that succeed and fail is, you know, just persistence.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, because there's, you know, you can relate, and I can, that there's a lot of fucking times of where, you know, you kind of think, what am I doing here? Like this, it's going nowhere, and you don't see the progression, but then it suddenly hits. So I think, yeah, that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
There was, again, last kind of couple of questions I wanted to come on to, because we're
definitely running over, aren't we?
We're definitely running over slightly.
Oh my God.
It's good.
I'm so sorry,
no,
Lucas.
Mate, don't apologise.
Well, I feel like I should have been more concise.
With Connor, I had a 3-hour episode. I've had 2 3-hour episodes before. This is good. It's because the conversation's flowing, so don't worry.
Okay, cool.
You know, being from more of an e-com side myself, be interesting hearing, because obviously a hard part of the job is getting it on the stand, right? On the shelves.
Yeah.
What then happens after that point? Because then another challenge, people actually buying the products. And there was an interesting thing I watched a while ago now about these 2 brothers who started a beverage company, and they changed their product slightly that was originally like a fizzy drink to being like they changed it so it was almost fit into the still water section.
Yeah.
And it kind of looked a different way to water did, and that's because when it was amongst all the fizzy drinks, no one would pick it up, and it would be put to the back, and it didn't kind of stand out. But then when it was in the water section, then people it was flying off the shelves. So it's a whole strategy in itself. What does that look like from the moment that it's actually there on the shelf?
Yeah, I guess what you really need to gain confidence when you start this, because I am not so enamored by my own idea of this ginger beer business that I would fail to observe if things were not going well. Like, if particularly pre-Planet Organic, pre any of this stuff, my original 20 shops, if none of them had reordered, if no product was moving, and I strongly believe that with a new product, what you've got to have is someone trying it, being like, oh, that's nice, and then picking it up again. That's kind of how volume moves. It's not a case of you will create something that's so visually amazing and appealing that people will be like, oh, wow, that looks fantastic. Yeah. And everyone will kind of reach to try it. You need people picking it up again, and then telling their friends about it. And that's kind of the brand and the advocacy and how it all grows. So
it's down to quality, isn't it?
I want to believe it, because to be honest with you,
for retention, it definitely is.
Yeah. To be honest with you, my first cans were pretty, in hindsight, were pretty awful looking. Like, they didn't look very good on the shelf. But luckily for me, there were enough people that liked the taste of them that they would kind of go back and go back again. So I did have shops reordering, and that is all you really need at an early stage to gain confidence that it can work. Because being a one-man team and knowing that I would be a one-man team for the foreseeable, what I couldn't have was a situation where I would get stocked with a shop, as you were saying, product goes on shelf, and I need to be there to sell it. I have to have the product in some way or for some reason selling itself off the shelf. And I'm lucky that I've chosen ginger beer and chosen to do it in a can and chosen to make it look a little bit different, have interesting colors. I don't know. But one way or another, it is selling itself off the shelf, or people are picking it up and being like, oh, I'll give this a punt. And that is all of the encouragement you need to continue on. Because, as I said before, if that hadn't been there, if I didn't have the shops reordering, if I didn't have volume moving, I would have stopped. I'm not so obsessed with ginger beer that I would fail to listen to the market in that particular way. But because I've been lucky and people have wanted to try the drink, and because I have people that come to my Sunday stall and come back pretty much every week or every 2 weeks just to kind of chat to me, pick up some ginger beer because they like it, I know that I'm onto something that can develop these kind of super fans.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of books you'll read in business that talk about just developing that small scale, really hardcore community. Absolutely. And then all you have is a scaling problem.
100%. Yeah. So finally then, what is that envision? And I know it's a very difficult one because the goalposts always move. I've had this problem before. You set a goal, you set an end, and then that changes a year later. Perspective changes, and you either undershot or you're overshot. And I mean, for you, what does the end goal for this brand look like?
I have to be totally honest and say I don't know, because what I am really enjoying is the day-to-day process of building this thing. And in fact, one of the reasons I've been feeling not so hot over the last few weeks is engaging with that future, thinking about business planning, thinking about what is it going to take in terms of volume of cans per month for me to get enough kind of profitability that I can even employ one person. What is it going to take for me to be profitable as a business? And thinking about that future is scary because it's a hell of a lot more cans than I'm selling at the moment, and I've been working quite hard at it, and it's hard to see that kind of path.
Yeah.
Luckily, through doing a business plan and doing kind of projections in Excel, it does sort of map out a bit of a path for you, which is good. So I'm now feeling a lot more comfortable with it than before. But I think what I really want and what would give me pride is to use, and I've said this from the beginning, use the amazing opportunities I've had in my life, so the privileges that have allowed me to start this business, and then employ people, give them an amazing experience experiencing the kind of things that I've been experiencing, create a really nice culture, create somewhere that people want to work and have fun and can really kind of develop them and engage them in a part of our economy that's kind of fun and young and cool and is really receptive to like fun guerrilla marketing and loads of outside the box ideas. I think that for me would be the most rewarding process. So I guess I can't speak necessarily for the end state of what I want to happen, but what I've got in my sights for the short to medium term is definitely hiring at least one person, and then hopefully, if we can make it continue to work, growing the team from there and building something with the right culture that sells ginger beer. Yeah. Like, if I were to sit here and say to you, my vision is amazing ginger beer for the entire world, I would honestly want to hit myself in the face. Like, I don't think that that's an appropriate vision all you want to do, or all I want to do anyway, is continue creating this movement that seems to have picked up some people along the way that really like the drink, and involve people operationally that can give them the kind of weird and wonderful, massive range of activities on a day-to-day basis that I've loved. And that includes cycling, carrying boxes, includes social media, pitching to stores, it includes recipe formulation, figuring out the ops, figuring out how to source, becoming more environmental. There are loads and loads of facets of the business that need a hell of a lot of work, and I know that I can't do it all myself, so I'm excited to bring people on to help me develop it.
I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? And a lot of people have this huge end goal in mind, but most people, when they hit that goal, they look back and say, I fucking took the journey for granted. That's what we love. It's the journey. And there was this interesting quote I saw that the man who is obsessed with the journey is going to get to the journey quicker, to get to the destination quicker than the man that's obsessed with the destination.
Yeah. I think that rings completely true. I think if you don't love the process, then you're going to really struggle to stay motivated to drive towards whatever that finish line may be. And as I said, I don't know what my finish line is, or even if there is one. But certainly being kind of really appraising of the experiences you're having. And I've been bad at this recently, as I said, because I've not been feeling myself, but all of the joys of cycling around, all of the wins, all of the rejections, managing to slowly build a brand reputation and get a seat at tables that previously you couldn't get a seat at. All of that should be feeding in so positively to kind of who you are and what you're building. It's like I was talking about at the beginning, building Lego. You're just building a structure around you, which is this soft concept of brand and a bit of reputation. And that is eventually what I hope will kind of deliver business success. But the hallmark of success for me in the medium term would just be building and sustaining a team and getting people involved and bringing them a great experience.
Well, mate, it's been a pleasure, having you on here and seeing the journey. I've been keeping a close eye, and it's amazing what you're building, and I personally love the drink and love the brand, love what you're doing. So I'm really excited to see where it continues to go. But I've massively enjoyed you coming on today. Really, really appreciate the time, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah. So from my end, I want to say I've loved chatting to you. I know it's been a longer session than you necessarily.
Not necessarily. We get a few around this mark. So.
Yeah. I mean, we've covered a lot of things, and it's an absolute pleasure to be chatting to you. When I got your message over the weekend to ask if I'd come on, I was flattered and thrilled. I love doing stuff like this, and it does make me, even as I'm chatting into this microphone, reflect on what has happened, what's still to come, and what's important to me. So I appreciate the opportunity. And also, as I said to you before we started, what you have built here with Hanby Media is in itself really, really impressive. And the fact that you even run a podcast and choose to run a podcast after your normal working hours is kind of a testament to your hard-working attitude too. So it's a real privilege to be involved, and great to chat to you, mate.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, where can everyone find you, the brand, the drink?
Oh yeah, the sales, the important sales part.
We can't
of the
forget the
podcast.
CTA at the end.
The CTA, exactly. I'm terrible at the CTA. Well, basically, you can find them in the Planet Organics and the Euphorian Bakeries. You can find them online. You can find me in Camden Passage every Sunday. Camden Passage is in Islington, and I'll be there doing my market stall. So, to be honest, that's how I'd much rather you get involved. If you are interested in ginger beer, come and see me. Try a few samples and have a chat. It's a good vibe on a Sunday, particularly if you're hungover. Likely I'll be hungover too. We can all chat about how hungover we are over a couple of ginger beers.
And how the ginger will help that.
Exactly, the remedial benefits of the ginger beer. But
Nice. Well, guys, if you found this valuable, if you enjoyed it, please give us a follow, like, subscribe. We're on YouTube at Unwind Pod, and also Spotify at Unwind Pod. But yeah, really appreciate you guys tuning in. We're growing, which is exciting. We're posting these weekly, and we've got some great guests lined up over the next few months. So really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.
And Spotify's super easy. You can find it. You can type in Lucas, literally the name Lucas, and
it's a pretty unique name.
Yeah,
the way it's spelled
Loukas, and you'll get the podcast straight away. I found it really fast earlier this week. So do support small businesses, guys, and have a look at the podcast and the other episodes too. It's all great stuff.
Cool.